Hi everyone, my name is Kelly Schwartz. I am a filmmaker, writer, animator, and owner of the Indie Film Factory based in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I am very excited to share with you my very first online workshop, Directing Actors When, well, the director isn't helping. Now, before I go into this, I want to explain why I'm creating this workshop. Having directed over 11 feature films in my life, I have worked with a variety of different actors, ranging from people that have went to Juilliard all the way to local actors who've never done a movie or a role in their life. And one thing that I've realized over the years is that directing actors is so fundamentally important. And it's something that is often overlooked, especially with a lot of independent filmmakers focusing so much on the camera, the editing, the lighting, and so forth. And that's what we find a lot when you're working with a lot of independent filmmakers. And I get a lot of comments from actors when I work with them saying, thank you so much for giving me a little bit of attention to help me through this process. Now, let me be very clear. To be an actor, it takes a lot. And, I'm not a performer, I'm not an actor, but I've been around a lot of actors. I know a lot of actors. They're my dear friends, and they put so much love and dedication into their work. And it is an extremely nerve-wracking thing if you are kind of on set and you don't have the tools or the resources to actually get your job done. And that is why I think it's so important for us to talk a little bit about that today. So as we go through this, feel free to stop it, take notes, and then obviously, if you have any questions, you can email me. My email will be provided at the end of this, as well as in the comments section below. All right, well, first let's talk about why we are here. So the goal of today's workshop is not for me to teach you how to act. I'm sure there's a lot of gurus out there that can do a much better job in giving you techniques, and I'm certainly not here to do that today. But what we are here is we're here to understand how directors think. As a director, I can give you a little bit of kind of insight into that. And when you understand the director's mindset, of course, casting makes more sense, direction makes more sense, set dynamics makes more sense, and it may help you as a performer not just get the job, but do a great job once you get it. So my goal is to give you tools that you can actually use on set. All right, so a little bit about who I am. As some of you may know, following me on social media, I have been making movies now for about 25 years. And I've done everything from live action films to animated films. I've won awards. I'm an Emmy award-winning filmmaker. I've done commercials. In my studio here in Las Vegas, we produce, not just feature films, but we also do advertorial content, branded content and films for brands and clients all over the world. I'm a working director and producer, and more than anything, I love narrative filmmaking. I've worked with actors with massive resumes. I've worked with actors with first-time credits and everything in between. And when it comes to what I want to share today, I really want to talk about those moments, those long days on shoots, the successes and the mistakes that I've made, and of course, what it looks like in the casting room, something that a lot of actors may not understand and how things work. So I think it's really important. And I hope that you'll take time to research me and my work as you leave this course. So point number one, the mindset of a director. What do directors actually look for? I get that question a lot. And one thing that I will say is that there's not any particular thing that directors look for. It could be a series of situations, and it's a pretty complex conversation. So I hope to give you a little bit of insight on how we actually do the casting process. So, first off, I want to say this, casting is not personal. I know it must feel personal if you're auditioning, you're not getting a role. If you've done this long enough, you kind of go, whatever. I know actors that are getting requests to do self-tapes literally all day long. They'll be at dinner and they'll get an email from their agent saying, send us a self-tape within the next hour. I know people that have gone through that. But at the end of the day, it's a numbers game, and casting is not personal. Casting is often emotional, it's instinctual, and of course contextual, but the best actors don't always get the role. Directors are often trying to match emotional tones. They're trying to create believable relationships between other cast members that they may have cast or may be considering to cast. And of course, to build a cohesive ensemble of actors. Here's the other thing to take into consideration. Movie making is 90% business. So when you're thinking of it as in terms of kind of a job, your brand, which may be very talented, may be very capable for a particular role, may not suit the production very well. So for example, if you're making a movie and a distributor needs to sell the movie overseas, they may be looking for named actors or something that have some type of credibility to help them. And where I think a lot of actors that are getting their start will get like smaller roles. I guess they say there's no such thing as a small role, but in some extent, there are areas where you can get a foot in the door, taking kind of a less crucial role in terms of visibility that may help propel your career. But oftentimes when you're on the development side as a director, you're looking for people that'll help you sell your film. And if it's not somebody that's famous, it's putting a great cast together that almost have a familiarity about them that help the audience and the distributor see the potential. And it's something that a lot of actors, I think, aren't aware of. They think, well, I just wasn't picked because I wasn't good. I don't know how many times I've had to pass on unbelievable talent, not because they weren't talented, of course, but because the production parameters required something completely different. So casting isn't about you, at least in the way you think. You can give an excellent audition and still not be cast. And the reasons may include there's a chemistry with another actor, the tone mismatch, the energy disrupts the group or the dynamic. And it's not a reflection of your talent, it's a reflection on the whole project, the whole picture. Oftentimes when you're putting together a cast, I kind of associate it to like building a football team, kind of a sports analogy, if you will. So the idea is if you're going to get a great quarterback, the quarterback can be the best quarterback in the whole league, but if they're not supported by receivers, people that can catch the ball, or a defensive line that can keep them safe, it doesn't matter how good they can throw. That they're not going to be an effective quarterback. So the same thing applies with an actor. If you find a really great talented actor, if they don't have a good supporting cast or a team around them, it could stifle that performance. So as you're thinking about it, you have to understand that you play a very particular piece of a puzzle, but not the whole puzzle. So talent versus team energy. Directors don't just cast performances, they cast people. Now, that's something to remember is that, I'm sure you've seen or heard Alexander Payne. He's one of the most prolific contemporary filmmakers of his time. This is a director that's known for coming in and casting people that are just like normal people. And that is something that he's done extremely well. And I always like to say directors, they don't just cast for performances. So you could have a really great performance, but if your energy or the look or the style or the vibe doesn't mesh with that character in the director's mind, you're probably going to get passed on. But again, it has nothing to do with your talent. And it's again, a numbers game with this whole process of casting. So kind of giving you an idea of what I actually look for as a director. And I've done, hundreds of different casting sessions over my career. And it's something that I'll give you kind of a high level view of. The first thing is I will always choose collaborative actors, people that are willing to give, people that are willing to be collaborative, to be malleable to the situation. If you get an actor who kind of has a feeling that they're stuck in their ways, or they want to come at you with very particular things that could steer other cast members away from your overall goals, that could be a problem. Curious actors. I look for curious actors. I look for people that are always asking questions and are really curious to kind of get more information, not just about their character, but about other characters and other parts of the story. People that actually take the time to ask those questions, that's usually a really, really good trait that I look for. And of course, actors who build the room. When you're casting a lot of actors, you want to find actors that support the other cast. And one of the things that you discover quickly is if you've got actors that are showboaters, people that really want to suck the oxygen out of the room, they could be problematic. And they could also break down the chemistry of the cast within that situation. You got to remember that you're going to be spending a considerable amount of time with people when you're working on a movie set. So the director wants to place people together that he or she knows that will complement each other, but also kind of be cool. You want to hang out with cool people, right? I've been given the opportunity to audition and even have consideration for pretty impressive, famous talent, and I passed on them not because that I simply passed on them because of their attitude or the the baggage that came with it. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing for me personally is the story. It's the story and the characters. It's not so much the mechanics. And sometimes I get, dinged in distribution land, and I get penalized for that. But, for me, it's about really finding good people. So one thing I will always kind of, choose those things over, for example, negative energy. If somebody has negative energy, I don't care how talented you are. I don't care how many laurel leaves or credits you have, or how famous you are. If you've got bad energy, bad vibes, you're not going to be on my set. I'm just not going to have it. Ego-driven behavior, people that are toxic, adversarial personalities, and again, even if they're talented, it doesn't make any difference to me. I don't like toxicity. I don't need it, and therefore I don't choose it, even if it means it's going to get me a bigger distribution deal at the end of the day. All right, so point number 2, not all directors are created equal. Some directors come from different backgrounds. For example, I come from an animation background. I started my career wanting to be an animator, and I had kind of full range of creative environments. I didn't have any limitations being an animator. When I got into live action filmmaking, for me, the technical part of the process wasn't as exciting. For me, it was about the story. It's always been about the story. But I'm one person. There are a lot of filmmakers out there that come from a visual media background. They come from a commercial background. They come from a music video background. They're previously cinematographers or editors. And those are really great skills to have as a director. But I will tell you, in some cases, they have to work extra hard to get into the emotional context of what actors actually need. And we'll talk about that. All right, so different directors, they come from different backgrounds, of course. There's 2 broad types, and I'm going to kind of use it for the sake of simplicity. You have technical directors. These are, directors that are, again, focused on the aesthetics. They're either focused on lighting or the cinematography or the blocking or the framing or how things are going to cut together or the visual effects, and they're really caught up in the coolness of all that. And there's nothing wrong with it, but that's a technical director. That's something that I am not. Then you have an actor-focused director, which I would like to think I'm more of an actor-focused director, but an actor-focused director is somebody whose focus really is on the performances. They're really concerned with the emotional maps of the characters, and they're there really to get into the details of a performer's behavior and help them find a way to deliver something on camera that is meaningful for the story. First off, neither of these are right or wrong. There's not one that's better than the other. I mean, first off, you've got a lot of really famous filmmakers that are technical directors. And then you have some that are kind of right there in the middle. I think it's important as a filmmaker, as a director, to understand both sides of the equation. For example, if you don't know anything about cinematography or editing or lighting, you could have a harder time on set. So I think it's important. I kind of find myself somewhere closer in the middle. I lean more toward a actor-focused director, but at the end of the day, I think that each of these approaches are going to be different experiences for the actor overall. And that's really what the goal of today's workshop is, to help you navigate those things in the event you find yourself on a set with a technical director or somebody who's not really focused on the performer-focused things that you need to get your job done as an actor. So let's talk a little bit about technical directors, to kind of recap on that. They often focused on visual aesthetics, composition, lighting, camera movement. Their common backgrounds are commercials, music videos, highly visual storytelling. And the reason why I give you these points is because as you're doing your research, you're probably going to have a good understanding of who your director is if you get cast on a movie. So, for example, if you find out what kind of background I have. If you get cast on one of my movies, you could easily research to see what kind of things that I do. Oh, Kelly has a video production company. Oh, Kelly's done feature films. You can kind of get a sense of what these individuals have. If they lean heavily toward music videos or they've never done a feature film, chances are they're going to probably be focused heavily on the technical aesthetics. And I could be wrong. There's some music video directors that are also very performance focused. So I don't want to generalize at all, but it just gives you a little bit of context to help you in case you need to do some research on who you're going to work with. All right, so what does technical direction sound like? Well, these are three little things that I put together that are kind of funny, but I've heard these, and it's like hold there, like stop on the mark. Don't maybe just stop there, or hit the mark. That's another one. Can you turn slightly toward camera? Oh, chin up. Or they don't tell you anything, and instead they're talking with the cinematographer the whole time, or the lighting, or the gaffer, or something. That's another indication of what they may give you or may not give you. So what does this mean for you as the actor if you find yourself on a movie set that has a director that is a technical director type? Well, look, they could give you very little emotional direction. That's the first thing. So you can't depend on them giving you some kind of emotional direction. They may just trust you to do your own thing. There's an actor that I worked with one time, and she was telling me, she's like, yeah, the last movie I was on, I think I talked to the director 5 times in the whole 2 weeks I was on set. And that was pretty crazy to me. He would tell her, land here, stop here, look this way, do this. But that was it. That was the extent of it. And then she would ask, do you need anything more? And he'd say, nah, I think that was good. And he was really focused on the frame, the lighting and the cinematography and stuff. So focus on how, when these directors come onto the set, they focus on how performance fits the frame or the edit. And this does not mean they don't care. So let me just reiterate this. Because they're focused on those other parts, it doesn't mean they don't care. It just means that their primary language of cinema is through the technical aspect. It's not through the performance. So what do you do? So the difference between a technical director and, let's say, a actor-focused director is they're primarily concerned with emotional truth. I love emotional truth. I love finding truth within the fiction for which we're trying to create. I love character arcs. I love figuring out how a character starts here and then they end up over here, and what that process is. What is that change? What is that evolution for that character throughout the entire film? And of course, the scene objectives, like what are the goals of each of these scenes? These are so important. And this is basic, acting class 101 kind of thing. But as a director, those are the things that excite me. I often leave the camera choices to the DP, although I will say I do know my shot list inside and out. I am an editor, a really great editor, by the way. And I know the inside and outs of the camera choices, the lensing, all of those things, the lighting. I know what I need to make it look a certain way. But I don't get into the details of that. I don't sit there and go, well, what kind of lens are we using? And can we, back that shot up? I'm not focused on that as much. I say, this is kind of the concept. This is the feeling I'm going for. I understand the light source needs to be here. This is the shot that I need. Okay, now I'm done. I'm going to walk over and talk to my actor. I'm going to give my actor everything that they need to help them get into the mindset of what they're doing. I love talking about the motivation. So one of the things I'll talk about a lot with my actors is I'll talk about the idea of what motivates you to do a certain thing. Nobody does anything by chance. So even if it says in the slug line, you grab that cup of coffee off the table, as simple as an action as that is, there's some level of motivation behind that. And then, of course, what are the relationships between you and the other people that you're interacting with? Whether it's an animal or another human or a robot or a CGI character, there's some level of relationship that has to be established. What is that relationship? And as a director, that is something I'm constantly trying to figure out and focus. Sometimes I create backstories that don't even exist in the movie to help the actors get through these things, to think a certain way. And of course, emotional beats. What are the emotional beats of each of these scenes that help the story or help the audience understand the story and where things are at emotionally? So as I mentioned before, I kind of land somewhere in the middle as a director. I of course, focus on the performance, the emotional clarity of the scene, the truth over polish, and I would rather fix a shot than fake a moment. That's the big thing. Actors are my primary storytelling tool, and that is absolutely the fact. So we're getting into the details, and I'm hoping you're following along with this. We're going to talk about point 3. My point 3 here is what is bad direction and how can actors avoid it? So bad direction is something that you get a lot from first-time directors. I mean, let's be fair. I mean, unless you're directing movies, I'm lucky. I've directed 11 actually 12 feature films. I've done it. And I will tell you that not many people have the ability to direct that many movies. I have some friends that have directed 20 to 30 feature films. But I will tell you this, it's difficult and it's a stressful job. And as a director, you don't have a lot of opportunities. You're always learning. Every movie you do, you learn a little bit something. But if you've only done one or you've done a short film at school or whatever, you're going to probably give some bad direction, right? That's just that's how it is. And as an actor, you're going to receive that bad direction. So the idea is understanding what bad direction is. And this isn't for you to say, call out the director on this, but it's for you to understand as an actor, as a performer, how to navigate this, because it's profound and it's very, very much a regular thing, pervasive issue throughout filmmaking, especially independent filmmaking. So let's talk about that. What is bad direction? Well, first off, it's vague. That's the big thing. It's things like, needs to be a little bit more angry. Could you do that scene just a little bit more angry? Like, what does that even mean, right? There's also result-driven direction. That's where a director will say, hey, could you kind of look like this? Like, like some kind of a caricature. And then ultimately it's actor unfriendly direction, which is stuff where you're yelling at somebody or you're telling them that they're not doing something a certain way and you don't have an answer for it. And you're just getting frustrated at that actor. I will tell you this, and this is full disclosure, I have done all of these. I have done every single one of those bad directions early on in my career. But what I have learned from it is that when you say things to people like, do it bigger, do it less, be sadder, that those notes don't give anything playable to an actor. It's nonsense. And usually when you give that type of direction to an actor, what ends up happening is the actor tries to either emulate something that you're doing, or they try to emulate something that they think they know. Oh, my Uncle Joe, he was always big. Maybe I could just do a caricature of him. And guess what? The actor is doing a caricature of somebody else. One of the key factors here is the danger of demonstration. One of the biggest traps that directors will sometimes do is they'll demonstrate on how they want an actor to act. And that leads to, the actor, again, mimicking the director, performing a vision of what they think the director wanted, because at the end of the day, as the performer, you're wanting to please the director. You don't want to do a bad job. You don't want to embarrass yourself in front of the crew. You want to do the best job possible. And that's something that I think as a performer, you're going to search, you're going to look, and you're going to go, how do I please this person? And sometimes what they give you it doesn't make any sense. So again, caricature, you can become a caricature, you can become actorish, and you could lose authenticity for that character, and it could ruin the whole performance, and that's a problem. And remember, it's your brand too. So it's not just about the movie, sometimes it's about your brand. You as an actor, you want to do the best job you can, not to outstage everybody else, but to help support the film in a meaningful way. So how do actors fall into this trap when they do get bad direction? Well, when the direction isn't clear, actors may chase results. We talked a little bit about that, trying to please the director. They perform emotions instead of experiencing them. So if somebody says, be more angry, well, then you just kind of, you perform that more angry level instead of trying to experience what that means. Because, anger can be, but it can also be internalized. And if you feel that stuff, if you feel it, then it makes for a better experience. You got to remember something about the camera. The camera is like a magnifying glass. It is a magnifying glass on your face and your energy and your emotions. And the slightest twitch is 1,000 times bigger than what you may or may be thinking about. So when you think, oh, did the camera get that? Trust me, the camera got it. So the bigger you are, sometimes, the even more grandiose it comes out on film. So sometimes having a level of subtleness, emotional internalization, can actually feel much better and lead to better results. I always try to say feel instead of act. If you're feeling your way through a scene, that's going to be much more impressive for the camera than you acting. In fact, I wish they wouldn't even use the word acting as a definition of something. I think it should be called feeling, because your job is to feel, and my job as the filmmaker is to steal that feeling and put it somewhere in the edit. That's the job. And if you can feel your way through a performance, you're going to have a better result for your overall. So again, the goal of it is to feel your way through the performance and connect with the reason why you feel a certain way, and be prepared to create some kind of emotional backstory or some kind of a thing that can help you get to that place very quickly. Which leads us to our next topic, point 4. And it's when the director gives you nothing. How to manage non-direction. All right, so what happens when a director gives you nothing? When they give you bad direction, or they just give you simply nothing. And this happens, of course, more than actors realize, and especially when you're working with a first-time director, right? That's the key indicator, or a technical director, right? So I'm going to give you a scenario. In this scenario, a kid comes home from school. They want the family car for a date, right? But the parents are mad at them because they didn't pass a test. And this scene ends ultimately with the kid convincing their parents to give them the keys anyway. Now, when you get to set, the director, they only give you 2 things. They give you be manipulative and be sneaky. Well, first off, what does that mean? What does manipulative mean? That is a very difficult direction. So if you get something like that, or you get be sneaky, like what's the first thing you think of? When I think of be sneaky, I think of the cat burglar sneaking around, with the the Hamburglar mask, sneaking around the corner, that kind of thing. That's what I think of when I hear the word be, sneaky. So that's terrible direction. A director should never give you that. But let's just say that's all you get. Why? Because he or she is focused on setting up the camera, right? So the dialogue in the scene is also not very helpful. The dialogue is this. The kid says, "Hey, Mom, Dad, can I borrow the car tonight?" The mom says, "You failed your science test." And the kid replies, "I know, I was told I could retake it later." The dad says, "That's not the point. You should do better." And the kid says, "I agree. That's why I'm planning to study all weekend. I just need some time to clear my mind. Can I borrow the car?" And the mom says, "This time, but this whole weekend, your head is in the books." Okay, so going back to what the director said, be sneaky. What is the kid? What does the kid do? Do they come in and go, "Hey, Mom, Dad, can I borrow the car tomorrow night?" That's sneaky, right? Or manipulative is like, "Hey, Mom and Dad, can I borrow the car tonight?" Right? That's probably how an actor would interpret. And of course, I'm not an actor, so forgive me. But that's how they may interpret that direction. Now, if I'm thinking that, I'm thinking about being manipulative. Well, manipulation of something isn't something that should be that obvious, right? The dialogue is already there. That's there to support you. And if you can't change the dialogue and you got to stick to this, something that may be helpful with this moment is to consider really what you could do to kind of disarm your parents. If you already know when you get home, and the script may not say this, but you probably already have a good indication that they know that you failed a test. You clearly know it. It's not like that's a shock to you. And when you get home at your house, you walk through that front door, you're immediately understanding that this could be an uphill battle. So would you come in with anything less than humility? In my opinion, no. No. And as the actor, as a director, I would say to the actor, I would like for you to really show them that you are devastated, by this failed grade, because at least that is something that the other actor can pull from. If you came in going, "Hey, Mom and Dad, can I borrow the car tonight?" Well, guess what? Your mom, that's going to be hard for that other actor to play. The thing, they're going to be angry. They're going to take that second line, which is, "You failed your science test," to a whole new level if you come in cocky or sneaky, right? And of course, how do you backpedal on that? When you say, "Yeah, I know, I was told I could retake it later." That's not the point. You should do better. All of these other lines are kind of a domino effect. But if you were to come in and just be like, "Hey, Mom and Dad, can I borrow the car tonight?" That's a different motivation. because you're doing everything you can in that moment to disarm your parents. Now, that may be considered manipulative, and in some ways it is manipulative, but the point is that that gives the other actor something that they can track a little easier, if that makes any sense. The key indicator here is do your homework. You have to know your character deeply. First off, what is it they want? What is it they fear? What are the contradictions of their life? What are the complications and things that they ultimately feel that could be a useful tool in helping you shape not only your performance, but giving other actors in the scenes around you something that can help bring out the best in them? And sometimes if you're left to your own devices with your performance, you really need to work and collaborate with the other performers. Now, the thing that it's key is to understand the motivations behind every action, everything that you do, from the way you enter a room to the way you manage a prop in a scene, every line. What is every aspect of this line? What does this mean in every beat? What is happening between the lines? And how are you interpreting the things that other actors are saying to you? And if you can focus on that, that's going to be very helpful. And that's going to help you avoid coming off kind of amateurish with your performance. So if you're, let's say, doing a student film or a first-time film with a first-time filmmaker, you might need to kind of think about these things to help you dive through the performance in a way that's collaborative with the other actors in the moment. Asking questions, and a lot of them. Okay, so it's okay to ask questions, but don't rely on the director to do all the work, and don't wait to be saved by direction. The thing is, if the answers aren't helpful, you have to ground yourself in real life. What would you do? Not the actor, but what would you do in this situation? How are you able to respond to this situation? And what is your impression of the world around you? And how do the things around you affect the behaviors, the quirks, the twitches, the looks, all of those things for that character? Again, I'm going to stress this: stop acting, start feeling. The safest approach is to feel first and then react honestly. Acting is not imitation. Acting is experience. But you have to avoid copying performances that you've seen. So, for example, don't come in and try to do De Niro. De Niro does De Niro. You don't do De Niro. Playing ideas instead of impulses. That's also a recipe for things that kind of look a bit contrived. So you have to think about why you feel a certain way, figure out how to internalize those things, and give yourself some kind of a roadmap to get you through the scene. So, for example, as a director, sometimes I'll give the actors things like, okay, if the scene is to make them angry, even if the movie or the script has nothing to do with what I'm going to tell them, I'll give them some kind of bogus story. And I'll say to them, in this scene, you're supposed to come through the door, you're supposed to be angry. Before you got to the front door, you got a text from your girlfriend and she said she's breaking up with you. Well, all right, go do the scene. And then they go and they do the scene. And then that motivation is different. They're focused on that feeling of something, or they're focused on, some kind of an existential crisis that may help them get to a particular way. Sometimes that doesn't always work. And sometimes we got to go back and pull it back a little bit. But by doing those little things, you may find some magic in helping you kind of feel your way through something as opposed to trying to follow dialogue. So physical action carries emotion. That's the thing too. Emotions can express themselves through movement, behavior, and even stillness. When I say focus, I really want you to focus on what the character is doing. Not what they're trying to show, but what they're doing. Let that emotion leak out naturally. So if you're, for example, sitting at a desk and you're typing, the scene requires you to be typing, and then you're stressed out about something or whatever, you want to think about what you're actually trying to accomplish, not the dialogue behind it. The dialogue behind it, in my opinion, dialogue is the death to any. It's like the biggest trap for an actor. Yes, dialogue is wonderful if it's performed well, but it's a big trap. And most of the time you can fart out dialogue. A lot of dialogue is expository. I mean, that's really the point of dialogue, is to be expository, to help the audience track what's going on in the story. And some of the best films ever made are ones that do very little talking. Okay, so my thinking is when you're focused on the dialogue, then you're not really feeling those moments. So what I would always encourage you as a director or as an actor is focus on what it is you're doing. So if your job is to type the report, but the scene is to be stressed out about the war going on outside the door, instead of you doing the dialogue and thinking about that dialogue, I mean, of course you still have to do the dialogue, but your mind should be focused on, I've got to get this report over to headquarters because I have to, and I know that my boss really likes me to make sure everything is filled out correctly. That's where my energy is going at that moment, but my voice is going this way. What ends up happening is you find this interesting dynamic where it feels a bit more organic. Because if you think about it, all the time we're doing multiple things. We're talking while we're doing things. We aren't stopping and looking and talking most of the time. Most of the time we are experiencing life in the moment of multiple distractions. We're either on our phones, we're looking at a billboard, we're watching a show, we're driving, we're putting on lipstick, we're doing whatever we're doing. But the idea is that your mind, what you're speaking sometimes isn't always a reflection of what you're doing. But half the time your mind is split between two realities. And that's a quick hack to be able to help you get out of that moment of focusing too much on that dialogue. So point number 5, which is the hands-on exercise, think like a director. What I would love for you to do is go through your inventory of screenplay or sides or whatever you have. If you don't have access to something, maybe create something or download something from the internet. But I want you to take a moment to really investigate what each of these moments are. What do these things mean? Look at the dialogue, pick a character. If it's a character you've played already, I want you to go through your script, and I want you to think about what the motivations are for each of these things. And in addition to the motivations, I want you to think about what playable direction you could possibly give yourself. Thinking like a director that helps you navigate the scene in the event you are working on a set that doesn't give you much direction. And by doing this is going to help you be much more prepared in any kind of situation. And when you do get a director that is more of an actor's director, it's going to make the relationship even stronger. And so I think it's very important for you to take the time to kind of think about that, getting your mind in the process of giving yourself some level of motivation and self-direction. And at the end of the day, there's basic things like memorizing your lines, understanding the dynamics of the story, and coming up with really thoughtful questions that you can, in fact, ask the director. Because after all, you may be able to teach, he or she something about themselves. And ultimately, a great actor can make a director even better. Well, that's all I've got for you on this workshop. I hope this is helpful. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. And if you're interested, be sure to check out my books on Amazon. I have quite a few out there, but some of my bigger ones are What Film Schools Don't Tell You and A Filmmaking Mindset. It's never a bad idea to learn about the business of filmmaking. So I hope it helps. Take care. Peace out.